Hello there. Greetings, inhabitants of Soul Planet 3, interstellar eavesdroppers, and welcome to ChazRootNotes. I'm your host, Chaz from Electric Outworks. I have something special for you in this week's episode. It's a breakdown of my mix for the song Home by Austrian artist AVEC. I received a lot of private messages asking me about this mix, especially about how I created a sense of space and atmosphere in the mix that evidently resonated with many people. A common theme through a lot of these messages was about reverbs and what settings I used. First, I want to say thank you to those of you who listened to my mix and enjoyed it enough to reach out to me. I was simultaneously surprised, ecstatic, and humbled by your feedback. And secondly, I want to express my gratitude to the artist AVEC, as well as LewittMusicChallenge Microphones for making these tracks available. It's really a heartfelt performance of an amazing song, played by talented musicians, and beautifully captured with exceptional microphones. It's been my experience that songs with great arrangements and performances that have been well recorded practically mix themselves. Without doubt, this song definitely fits into that category. When I pulled up the multitracks for the first time, I was absolutely blown away by what I heard. Because the tracks were in such fantastic shape on arrival, I could really focusing on enhancing the emotional impact of the song. This song was really a joy to work on. And sure, I did put some thought and effort into the mix, but honestly, it didn't feel that way. It really seemed like the song kind of mixed itself, if that makes any sense. And I think that's why I was so surprised by the response I got. So these multi-tracks were made available back in March or April of 2020 by the artist AVEC and Lewitt Microphones for a LewittMusicChallenge mix competition that they co-sponsored. While under quarantine, the artists recorded themselves at their homes with Lewitt Microphones. I'll post a link up here that shows them recording the song and their reference mix. Now I noticed that this performance of the song is not the same one that appears on AVEC's 2020 album entitled Homesick. To my ears, this version sounds more intimate, urgent, and even more haunting, perhaps? And considering the circumstances under which they recorded, it's understandable. So I mixed the song in Reaper, but anything I'm doing here can pretty much be applied to whatever DAW you're using. Because so many of you asked, let's open the project session, jump into full screen mode, and take a look. All right, here we go. Okay, here we are. Welcome to my project session. I have a standard mix template that's evolved over the years. If you're new to Reaper, welcome to Reaper. This is the MCP or Mixer Control Panel view. It has a mixer here and a timeline view or track view, which they call the track control panel up on top. You can resize it and you can toggle in between the two. The first thing I do with a new mix project is I'll actually run the tracks through an application called Stereo Monoizer from Soundizers. I'll put a link in the description. I believe it's about $49, and what this software does is it analyzes audio tracks to determine if they're really a mono track or a stereo track. Sometimes you'll receive tracks from folks and they're a mono track, but it's a stereo file. So when you import these into your session, what will happen is that it'll force you to use stereo plugins when you only need to use mono. And that might not seem like a big deal, but if you get a project with 150 or 200 tracks or more, running a whole bunch of stuff in stereo that really only needs to be run in mono does add up on your system performance. And why do it if you have to do it? So this is what it looks like. Basically what you do is you can drag a folder or files into the top. You can set some parameters on the left here for overwriting files or creating copies and things like that. Generally what I would recommend is if you're going to use something like this, retain your original files as a source file and have your post-process files be copies. That way the originals are always there if you need to go back to them for some reason. Anyway, great product. Totally worth it. Cuts down on glitches, cuts down on system resource utilization, and I highly recommend it. So before I mix, I'll do things like this, Stereo Monoizer. Also, I make sure the files are renamed. If there's any editing that needs to take place, I like to group the files and name them in a certain way, in a certain order. So all that editing stuff I do first. And if it's a project with multiple songs, all the maintenance, all the house cleaning stuff, that all gets done first. And then after all that's taken place, then I get to mixing. That way I can focus on just mixing. So back to the template. What I have here is my standard template. Let me scroll down a little bit for you. And what I have, you can see here on the left, it is set up with folders and subfolders. I have groups that are set up for percussion with subgroups for beats and bass drum, snare drum, toms, overheads, a Latin percussion group or orchestral percussion group, and a miscellaneous group. And then I have a group for bass, and as you can see, there's an electric bass group, an upright bass group. Then there's a guitar group with some acoustic, electric, and lead subgroups. There's a keyboard group underneath that. And you can see I have a piano group, electric piano, organ, synth, miscellaneous. And then I do work with jazz bands, and sometimes there's projects where you might have some different kinds of instruments. So I have a brass group with tuba, baritone, horns, trombone, trumpet. There's a woodwind group where there's clarinet, sax, flutes, miscellaneous wind instruments. A string group with cello, violin, or viola. There's no acoustic bass in there. That's up in the bass group. And then after that, I have a BGV group, which is for background vocals, a Vox group, and the tracks in blue here, these are my returns. So I have a delay return, a reverb return, a second delay, and second verb, kind of preset. And after that, I have my parallel compression. So it says NYC here. Like drum NYC return, RTN, that means drum New York City compression return. So I have one for drums, I have one for the lead vocals, and then I have one called Shep's NYC return, and that is basically, as you can see from the picture of Andrew here, that is a Andrew Shep's rear bus style return that I have there. I don't use it all the time. On some tracks it's kind of cool, some tracks it doesn't work. After that, I have 4 buses that pretty much everything's routed to. My A bus is for my drums and percussion. My B bus is usually for the main instrument. If it's rock, it's going to be the guitars. C bus will be for other instruments. And my D bus is reserved for spatial and ambient sort of things. So, for example, my delay and reverb returns, and if there's like any harmonizer things, maybe my background vocals, sometimes if there's a string pad or some synth ambience going on, those are all routed to my D bus, because I do put a little stereo widening on just this bus, and I reserve it for things that I want to make bigger. So the A, B, C, D buses are all routed directly to the mix bus. My parallel compression, my drum, my lead vocal, my rear bus if I'm using it, those two are also routed to the mix bus. Then I have 2 tracks preset for reference mixes. Usually one is going to be a rough mix from the client, and another reference mix track is there. Say the client says, you know what, I want the song to sound like this Kanye tune, or I want it to sound like this Miles Davis tune, or I want it to sound like a Stone song. What I'll do is pop that track in to the second reference mix, and that way I can toggle between what I'm doing, their rough mix, and a reference mix of a commercial track. And this empty blank track, that's my first track that I import into. So let's scroll back to the other view. Okay, so a few things that I've done here. I have a custom set of buttons on the left that I've created in Reaper. And this is really handy for large projects when you start getting into lots and lots of tracks. So what I have done is set up a toggle button that toggles my various groups. So let's say I want to look at just what's happening with the drums and percussion. I can click on that, and it shows me just all the tracks in the drums and percussion group and subgroups. I can do the same thing with the bass. If I have guitars, that way I can just see those. And then same thing again, keyboards and all the way on down the line here. If I just want to see effects returns, there they are. My main buses, which are my 4 buses, and the mix bus. And this is just a super handy thing. So, and in the MCP view, mix control panel view here, my percussion group, which you saw on top in the other view, is on the left, And as I scroll to the right, you'll see all the other groups and subgroups and buses and returns and all that good stuff. So, and I set my mix sessions up this way because I do have a control surface that I use. I like to do a lot of my automation in things with faders whenever possible. I really like to use my faders for setting levels and pan and automation sometimes, and having everything set up this way just it integrates with the control surface. So what I would do at this point, after all my maintenance and house cleaning or housekeeping is done, I would click on this track and in Reaper go to Insert Media File, and then I would locate the files for the session, import them, boom, they're all going to populate in here. At that point, I would name them, drag them over to the appropriate area, and once that's all set, I'm ready to mix. So let's jump into the AVEC session. All right, so here's the AVEC session. A few things that I did that you couldn't see in the blank template. I like to map out the different parts of the song. So for example, I have regions and markers set up here on the top. So you can see where I have a slate in, an intro where the piano comes in, the verses, pre-choruses, choruses, bridges, guitar solos, all those sorts of things. Usually on the end I'll have an outro section, and I think I have a fade out here. Yep, I have a fade region and the actual end. There's an end marker, so I know where everything starts, where everything stops. This is important because I will automate the volume on the mix bus to bring the level up or down just to add to the impact of the song. All that stuff is mapped out. What I did with this song, and the benefit of working on this tune, was that they had a video showing them recording at home, and they did not play to a click. So what I did here, you see these numbers, 125, 124, 125, 124, all these little number things here. Because they didn't play to a click, I actually went through and tempo mapped each measure. I didn't need to do that necessarily, but sometimes it's helpful if you are using effects that are time-based. If you have a delay that you want synced up with the session, if the band did not play to a click track, you can tempo map this, and this is not locking everything and cutting and pasting it to a grid. It's basically creating a grid based on what they did. That way it retains the integrity of the artist's performance, and you can still have your time-based stuff linked in to a grid. On this session, what I noticed from watching the video was number one, there was no bass guitar. They had their drummer playing a floor tom, which I just called kick tom, because it was a floor tom kind of being used as a kick with a mallet. And then there was a snare drum that was really kind of being recorded with what looked to be like an overhead mic, so it was actually picking up both. So it was just a drummer with floor tom and a snare. This stuff I'll talk about in a bit here, this kit group, because the band did not play that. That was something that I snuck in. Then there's a guitar group. There were two guitars. Then there was a keyboard group. There was an electric piano, or there was an electric keyboard set to a piano setting, melodica. Then there was a background vocal and lead vocal. So the tracks that the band sent were very minimal. Again, so the first thing I do when I get the tracks imported and all the maintenance and housekeeping is done is I set all the faders at 0 and I hit play. And then I just start tweaking with the faders to get the levels where I like them, and I set the pans where I like them. Maybe play through the song a couple times. Once I have everything where it makes the most sense for most of the time during the song, then I try not to touch them. If there's any tweaks that need to be done during a hook, during a chorus, if it turns out later there's a part that is getting a little too loud or a little too quiet, I'll automate those volume changes, and I'll automate the pan changes if I'm doing any, and I do all that later. Basically, I try to set a mix that makes sense for the majority of the song, then go in and fine-tune with automation. So I'm not going to play the reference mix now just to keep the video shorter, but if you have an opportunity to listen to the rough mix and watch the video of them recording at home that I posted earlier, this will all make more sense. So let's work left to right. Let me start with the drum tracks that they submitted. The floor tom, kind of being used as a kick, and this overhead that was kind of on the snare. Here's what they sound like. So those tracks are pretty clean. What I did was I went into the floor tom, or kick tom I called it, and I just threw a Schoeps omni-channel plug-in on it. All right, I'm going to solo that and toggle back and forth with the channel strip on and off. Give that a listen. All right, so here I added some saturation, some even order harmonics. I added a little thump here, which is a neat feature that is on the channel strip. On the low end, I definitely beefed it up. At 60, I beefed it up 8 dB, and I did some tinkering with the mids, low mids, and highs. These tracks were recorded very clean, so I didn't even have a gate turned on. And I had some compression in there at a 2.5 to 1 ratio. And really, I just wanted to add some color, some definition. That's what I did. And then what I ended up doing on the kick drum track, after playing it through, I didn't think it had enough low end. So what I did was I added the Waves R bass. I set it to 40 hertz and just gave it a little bit of a gentle nudge down here just to fill in that low end. And let me play that for you. I'll toggle back and forth. It's subtle, but it really helps. And then on to the next track, which is the snare. I just used the Schoeps Omni channel. So let me play you the track just by itself with no effects. Here we go. And let me play it now, bringing the Schoeps Omni channel in. So again, you can see I added some even order harmonics. I did a little bass roll off at 100. Didn't even bother with a gate. There's some EQ, a little de-essing in here. Isn't probably doing much. And then the compressor at a really high ratio, it looks like. Let's put those all together. Okay. Cool. I did add some drum parallel compression, and there's also some verbs I put in on those drums. So let's start with the reverbs. So on the snare, what I did was I added in FabFilter Pro Q3, and I'm kind of doing the Abbey Road trick here, where I'm cutting some low out and cutting some high out, and that is pre-treating the snare track before it hits the Valhalla Room reverb. It was a preset that I used and then tweaked. And then on the bass drum, or floor tom, again, FabFilter Pro Q3, Abbey Road reverb trick here, and I use Valhalla Room. And this one was set for a medium gate, and you can see the settings here. And the amount of reverb that's actually in the track is pretty light. So let's do this. Let me play it, just these two tracks, with the kick, floor tom, and the snare, and I will toggle the reverbs on and off. Here we go. So that's what that sounds like. I added in some percussion samples just to put some syncopation in there. I'm a big fan of adding a little bit of syncopation and some oddness to a song. So I did that. It was blended in kind of subtly in the overall mix. So these 3 tracks here, this kick, this snare, and this hat, were done by me. They were not done by the band, and I snuck them in. So let me do this. Let me solo just the percussion track, and you'll be able to hear where my nonsense comes in. Here we go. So that was just some syncopation, some stuff I added in that I thought kind of worked with the song. And when I play the final mix, you'll hear it's not real prominent, but it's there. And it was meant to be a subtle thing. So next was the guitar groups. Now if I toggle back to the 2 guitar tracks here, you can see that the first track starts the song off, and the second one comes in at the first chorus and then plays throughout the rest of the song. For demonstration purposes, let's bring the guitars in right at this chorus. I'll bring them in with no effects. Here we go. So those are the raw tracks. Let's start with the first guitar here. And on this one, I added some FabFilter Pro Q3 with some Insanity and some compressor. And what I will do is toggle the effects on and off. So we'll start with them off. So here we go. Alright, now let's try that with the second guitar. And just like the first guitar track, I will play this one and toggle the effects on and off. Okay, cool. So as you could hear, those tracks sounded really good. They were recorded really well. And what I did in there really was just to kind of get them a little bit more vibrant, so I think it sounded great. Okay, so now what I did was I wanted to add a little bit of room, a little bit of ambience to those guitars. These guitars are being sent to the guitar verb return here, and what I did here was I added a little de-essing, and I do this a lot. I will often de-ess something before it hits a reverb or a delay, so you don't get those weird artifacts, those little pings and boing noises that you'll get sometimes. And then I added FabFilter Pro Q3, and again, sort of the Abbey Road trick where you roll off some lows, roll off some highs. You carve out just what you want going to that reverb or delay. For the delay, I picked the Eventide SP 2016 reverb. So I think what I'll do is let me pull these effects up. I'll play the track and let you hear it with that reverb. So let's play it. So what happened there was kind of subtle. It makes a difference, but I think really what I was trying to do was just make it sound natural. So I'm going to play just the reverb so you can see what that sounds like. And here it is. And you can see the de-esser working here. And when I soloed just the reverb, a lot of that boingy and pingy sort of artifacts that you may get from reverbs and delays weren't there. And any de-esser will work. I just happen to use FabFilter Pro DS here, but the one that comes with your DAW probably is going to work just fine. Okay, so let's jump over into keyboard world here. On the piano, which was an electric keyboard, I had FabFilter Pro Q3 in there, and you can see I was cutting some low mids. I rolled off some low end for sure, and then at just over 1K, what I did was I added this shelf. But then what I like to do sometimes to give a little bit of separation between the left and right and just give some side-to-side energy and dynamics, instead of running this in stereo, I'll actually separate out the left side from the right side. And then what I do is I make it a dynamic EQ. So what this one's doing is actually an upward expansion. So you can see I have a shelf gently rolling up to +1 dB, and then I have the upward expansion, which is a dynamic EQ, bumping up a little bit more. So at certain points, the left side and the right side will bump up to about 1.5 dB, but each side will be different. So what it's going to do is accent that left to right motion. And then I added the trusty MJUC compressor from Klanghelm, and then I ran another EQ, because why not? And then what I did, and this is a little wacky, this is Nova. This is the Gentleman's Edition. It is a EQ. It's also a dynamic EQ, and what I'm using it here for is, as you can see right here, external sidechain. I am sidechaining the lead vocal to this dynamic EQ. It's carving a little bit of EQ out of the piano to make room for the vocals. And what I'll do is toggle them back and forth so you can see it with and without. And here we go. Alright, so a couple things here. Maybe you noticed that the left and right dynamic EQs were working separately, and I really like doing that on a lot of sources. It just, if you have a stereo track with stereo source, if you want to get some left to right movement going on, do that. The other thing I would say is that the MJUC compressor, I have it running in dual mono mode. I rarely use compressors in stereo mode. What dual mono does is it treats the left side and right side separately. A loud transient on the right side isn't going to impact what's happening on the left side and vice versa. Each one's being handled independently, which I think gives it a little bit more side-to-side energy. Then I had this Pro Q3 down here doing some cleanup, and I brought the vocals in part way that you probably noticed, and you could see that they weren't hitting too hard, but that the vocals that were side-chaining into it, you could see a little bit of activity here, but it was very gentle just to carve a little bit of space out for the vocals. Okay, so the next track in keyboard world is the melodica track, and we'll take it from the same point, at the start of that chorus, because that's where both keyboards are in. I'm going to solo it, and I'll play it with these two plugins on and off so you can hear it toggling. And what I have here is FabFilter Pro Q3. This one, again, I'm doing just some dynamic EQ stuff here. You can see there's like a dynamic EQ kind of shelf thing and different things happening. It's being finished with the Eventide Ultra channel. It is a channel strip from Eventide that I don't know how many people use this thing. It's amazing. So it has an input, a gate, a regular compressor, this pressor here, which I believe this module is sort of a stripped down version of their famous Omni pressor. It has a 5-band parametric EQ. This is really good for broad strokes. It's not super surgical. It's very competent. It has a little thing you can toggle that emulates a transformer. What also makes it worthwhile is it comes with their famous micro pitch shift. And Eventide's, they're known for their micro pitch shift. They're known for their delays and the reverbs, and it comes with a stereo delay that has all kinds of nifty little features, so you can link the feedback to the delay, to the EQ, to whatever. It's got all kinds of insanity in there. You can lock it in and tempo sync it, and you can see that I have that turned on. Let's play it without and with and see what I've done. Here we go. So as you probably heard, a lot of really cool things started happening here. The micro pitch shift and the stereo delays that were in, they weren't super heavy. I mean, you can definitely hear them, but I think they just kind of enhanced what was there. So then what I did was I set up a delay and reverb for the keyboards. On the piano delay, it is receiving from the piano. And what I did on the keyboard verb return is it is receiving from the piano and the melodica. And let me show you what I have going on for the plugins. On the piano delay, FabFilter Pro Q3, it's sort of an Abbey Road thing, but I threw in a little bit of left to right dynamic EQ. The next plugin is the Valhalla delay, and this was a dual delay set to 16th notes. And then on the keyboard verb return, more Abbey Road sort of trick stuff with FabFilter Pro Q3. And then I used the little plate reverb from our friends at Sound Toys. I have it set to about a second with the modulation turned on. Mix is fully wet, of course, because this is a return. So I think what I can do, or what I should do, play just the two tracks, and then I will toggle the delays and reverbs in. Here we go. So it's kind of subtle and kind of not. When we play the whole mix back, it's not going to sound like it's washed in reverb, but there's definitely reverb there. There's definitely delay there. So there we are for Keyboard World. Okay, let's jump into the all-important lead vocal track. One thing I like to do is try to get the vocals even you can see that I have some automation down here. Parts where she was singing that I wanted to kind of reinforce or make them a little louder, I bumped them up a couple decibels in spots. All through the track, all these little volume rides have been automated. Parts, again, that I thought should be a little louder, I just automated that. So let me play it without any effects, and you'll see what's happening with the little automation stuff.
Life an endless loop, repeating itself. Oh, I hate the thought of you with somebody else. No, I won't deny that you set my heart on fire.
Okay, so what I then did was I added some plugins in here to supplement the voice even more. So there is a Waves vocal rider. Let's put that over here so you can see what it's doing. And then on this session, it looks like I reached for the Sheps Omni channel again. And you can see, let's see, what did I do? I gave it a little bit of low end down here, the thump they call it. I rolled off under 120 hertz. I gave it some odd order harmonics and saturation. There's certainly some little de-essing going on, some EQ, some comp, no gate. I'll play it with and without real quick, and then you'll be able to see what these two different plugins are doing. Here we go.
Life an endless loop, repeating itself. Oh, I hate the thought of you with somebody else. No, I won't deny that you set my heart on fire. And I wonder why, but it feels like we're not enough.
Okay, cool. So that got me a basic vocal sound, and what I did is on the vocal group, I added some more effects, which I suppose I could have put on the track itself, but I didn't. I'm weird. I have the Black Rooster Audio VLA3A. It is a compressor. And then that is hitting a Waves J37 tape emulation. That's an Abbey Road Studer 4-track tape emulation. And let me toggle it back and forth. Here we go.
Life an endless loop, repeating itself. Oh, I hate the thought of you with somebody else. No, I won't deny that you set my heart on fire. And I wonder why, but it feels like we're not enough this time. Why you feel like home, and I don't wanna let go.
Let's look at the vocal delay here real quick. So what I have, again, FabFilter Pro DS, FabFilter Pro Q3, and once again, this is sort of an Abbey Road reverb trick. I'm using the Echo Boy from our friends at Sound Toys. Let me play the track, and I will toggle this delay in and out, and then I'll solo the delay so you can hear what it's doing on its own. Here we go.
Life an endless loop, repeating itself. Oh, I hate the thought of you with somebody else. No, I won't deny that you set my heart on fire. And I wonder why, but it feels like we're not enough this time. Why you feel like home, and I don't wanna let go.
Okay, cool. So there was some subtle delay going on there. If you were watching the plugins from the DS to the FabFilter Pro Q3 to the Sound Toys, you could see I had the de-essing working really hard here. When I soloed the vocal delay, there were none of those sort of pingy, boingy artifacts that are annoying in a mix. So it works. It's a really cool thing. So next, what I'd like to show you is some parallel compression that I put on the vocals. Vox NYC return for New York City compression. And what I did here was I put in Waves CLA 76. It went to the Puig Tech EQ. And let me play the track again. Here we go.
Life an endless loop, repeating itself. I hate the thought of you with somebody else. No, I won't deny that you set my heart on fire. And I wonder why, but it feels like we're not enough this time. Why you feel like home, and I don't wanna let go. With you I'm home, I keep holding on.
All right, so let's go to the background vocals next here. So what I have here is Vocal Rider from Waves, the Shep's Omni channel again, and the Micro Shift from Sound Toys, oh so tasty. So what I'll do is solo this, and I will play it with and without the effects for you. Here we go.
You feel like home, and I don't wanna let go. With you I'm home, I keep holding on. Oh, you're my home, I won't let go, I won't let go. With you I'm...
So that micro shift really added a lot there. You could see all these plugins working, doing what I wanted them to do, and kind of dialing in a sound. All right, so let's pull all these elements together here. I'm going to start with my A bus, which is normally my drum, percussion, and bass bus. There is no bass here, so it's just drums going through it. And what I have is a ChazRootNotes True Iron Transformer emulation plugin here. And then that is hitting a pair of Empirical Labs Arouser plugins, which is basically their distressor. The reason why there's two of them is because the plugin does not run in dual mono mode, and I like using dual mono, so I have to use two instances of the plugin, one for the left, one for the right, and then those are both feeding into the Waves PwigTech EQ, which is a Pultec style EQ. So here we go. Okay, so on to the B bus here, and in this song the B bus is just the two guitars, and what I have is again the ChazRootNotes True Iron plugin set up, and then I have the Waves Pwigchild 670, so let me play that for you. All right, on to the C bus. On the C bus, again, ChazRootNotes True Iron, adding some transformer emulation in there. Then the CLA, which is the Waves CLA 2A, and this one does not have a dual mono capability, so I'm running two of them, one for the left and one for the right. They are set identically and calibrated. And on this track, we have the keyboard group coming in. So the piano and melodica are hitting this. Let me hit play. I'll bring the bus processing for the C bus in and out for you. Here we go. All right, now to the D bus, my True Iron, and then here I have an emulation of an old tube compressor limiter unit. This is set to limit mode, and this is the U73B from Modified. And then after that, I have a free plugin from Alex Hilton. This one is the stereo control. It is set to a width of 150, and if we look at the D bus, what it's receiving It's receiving the background vocal group, the snare verb return, the kick verb return, guitar verb return, piano delay return, the key verb return, the vocal delay return, and the background vocal verb return. So let me play that, and I'll toggle the bus processing in and out for you. Here we go.
You feel like home, and I don't wanna let go. With you, I'm home. I keep holding on. Oh, you're my home. I won't let go. I won't let go. With you, I'm.
Cool, now let's take a look at the mix bus here. I have a Puig Child 670, and then I have the Puig Tech, and let me just play the entire mix at this point, and you can see what's happening on the mix bus. Here we go.
I don't know why, but it feels like we're losing touch. While you feel like home, and I don't wanna let go. With you, I'm home. I keep holding on.
All right, so if you've stuck with me through all this, thank you. You deserve to hear the final mix. And if you've jumped ahead to the chapter just to listen to the mix, you're a very naughty person indeed. So let me play it. I'm not going to touch anything. I'm just going to let it go. Here we go.
Is life an endless loop, repeating itself? Oh, I hate the thought of you with somebody else. No, I wondered why that you set my heart on fire. And I wonder why, but it feels like we're not enough this time. Why you feel like home, and I don't wanna let go. With you, I'm home. I keep holding on. Oh, you're my home. I won't let go. I won't let go. With you, I'm home. I'm home.
So there it is. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode, and I hope this answers some questions for those of you who are kind enough to reach out, as well as provide some insight into how I approach mixes. Thank you so much for watching, and I do hope to see you next time. And if you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking and sharing it, subscribing to the channel, and clicking on the notification bell. It really would mean a lot. And please leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Also, what topics you'd like to see in future episodes, or any music production tips that you can share with the rest of us. I'd really love to hear from all of you. In the meantime, I encourage you all to explore, discover, and create. Stay busy and productive on your artistic journey. And as always, this is Chaz from Electric Owl Works. Peace, love, and Ringo. Be good to each other. I'm out. Bye.